I feel a little more prepared for this town hall meeting than I did the first one, but appreciate those that have joined last month and for the wonderful warm welcome I've had here at the Department of Government Ops. So it's been fun to be back in stateside and back at Government Ops since I spent time at DAS as Deputy Director a number of years ago. And as I've wandered around, have been impressed that there are still folks around that I worked with and knew years ago. So it's been refreshing to renew acquaintances and get to know folks as well. As you can imagine, they have had me hopping from one meeting to the next, trying to drink out of the fire hose, get to know the divisions and departments within, and all various facets. There's never a shortage of new things to focus on and new things to learn, and a crisis of the day, it seems, many days here. So I'm grateful to be here and excited for the opportunity. I had, just by way of update as we jump into this, a wonderful opportunity last week to join the governor at his annual governor's cabinet retreat. And this year, as you probably saw in press and other means, that was held down at Bryce Canyon at Ruby's Inn. Having discovered Ruby's Inn many years ago as a resident of Cedar City, my wife and I venture over there multiple times a year. It's become our favorite national park, quite frankly, and I think the most stunningly beautiful. Every time I go, I'm surprised because I think that my eyes are playing a trick on me, because it just seems surreal that you could have that type of a formation and so forth right in front of you. And pictures just don't do it justice. So I was a little surprised to discover that there were a number of folks in the governor's cabinet who had never been to Bryce Canyon before, and this was their first experience, and certainly their reaction was what the governor had hoped for, quite frankly. And part of that was joining the park service and others to celebrate the centennial of Bryce Canyon. And they had a phenomenal celebration down there that included a ceremony out on the rim, a concert that evening, looking out over the park, and all sorts of events and activities. So beautiful, beautiful place, and a great opportunity to gather with good friends. In the retreat portion of that, as we met as a cabinet, as you can imagine, there was a lot of discussion about big rock ideas, and big rocks, and what are we going to do to change state government, make it better for the citizens and those who are taxpayers that use state government services and so forth. It was fun. It really was enjoyable for me to hear some of the big rock ideas and things that are occurring in other departments across the state. And I have been excited here in the weeks that I've been at DGO to sit in a number of conversations with some big rock concepts that are moving forward here and that we're working on, and look forward to the opportunity to share some of those as time progresses and we develop more. So anyway, appreciate the chance. I want to take an opportunity to introduce, he's probably out there online. I didn't tell him I was doing this, but Van Christensen is the new director of the Division of Finance. And we are thrilled to have Van on board. Chris and Marilee and I took him out to breakfast first thing Monday morning, and had the chance to welcome him warmly to the DGO family. And we're grateful to have him. For those who know him, you know of his character and caliber and experience. He's been with the state for many years, and comes with all kinds of experience from the state auditor's office. And most recently from the Department of Workforce Services, where he led their internal audit team over there. So we're grateful to have him here at Finance. We look forward to working with him and the finance team. We've had several meetings and talking about a number of ideas and so forth. As I've discovered in many of the departments, thanks for the emails from folks, there are many dedicated employees who have been here for a lot of years that are working hard and feel overwhelmed, quite frankly, and underappreciated. Finance is one of those areas that there's just a lot of folks putting their heart and soul into that operation and to the financial affairs of the state. And so we look forward to working with Van as we move forward to provide some additional resources there and try to help out as much as we can. But for those that are here in the building or as you come in, we encourage you to wish Van well as he begins his service with the Division of Finance. So grateful to have him. Just a quick reminder, you've probably seen this in emails unless you have yours filtered to go right to trash, but just a reminder that there is a time entry freeze between June 23rd and July 1st. So you'll need to track your time and enter it on July 2nd for pay period 13. Since we'll have a 2-week period there where there's a freeze on being able to enter time. So be mindful of that. We outlined that in the newsletter, or I believe it's in the newsletter as well. So don't panic if you're unable to enter time, but just keep track of it for later. I want to turn a few minutes over to Dan Chase to talk about our Gold Minute. Dan, if you're out there.
Yes, thank you, Director Dodge. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll try not to take too much time with this. Thank you to everybody. We are almost at the end of the first half of our run with the Gold Leadership Development, the GovOps Leadership Development Program, or GOLD, and it's gone really, really well. And the update I'll give you is this quarter, we've had great attendance. We have 265 registered April, May, and June. And one thing I want to draw your attention to is intentionally April, May, and June in the GOLD program have been focused heavily, exclusively on performance management issues as we draw closer to that July 1 deadline and emails you've gotten from Marilee and others. I wanted to make sure that if you have not enrolled, this quarter, make sure you get in there. There's still room in the June courses. Just one adjustment that I want to draw your attention to. If many of you have seen the icon or the imagery of the GOLD training program, when we bring that up in our live classes, it seems that most of you are familiar with it. We've got the self-paced training that is required, including the things that are required of all state employees: ethics and integrity, respect in the workplace, and of course HB 104, or the performance management training, is required of everyone. That you want to take that by July 1. Then we've got the live training. The adjustment is this: you've got to participate in the book club at some point in this calendar year. And the initial plan was starting July 1, we would start instituting coaching at the supervisor level. So this is primarily for supervisors. What we have decided to do with approval of leadership is to make that optional. We recognize that many of you are terribly busy right now. And quite frankly, coaching is most effective when it is not forced upon somebody. And so what we will do is let you know that the CLIP assessment for supervisors and the SEAT 360 for division directors and above will of course be available, and following those assessments there is coaching available, but it is optional. You are now no longer required to do that. And so our team, the leadership and organizational development team at HR, we've got coaches with experience who are eager, excited to work with you to help you get even better as leaders, as managers, but it's no longer going to be required. So I wanted you to be aware of that adjustment. We have, 400 plus on this call. That's not going to include all the supervisors. If you can make sure, if you can help us out, we'll send out other communications about that. But even in just word of mouth, if you'll make sure that people know that component of GOLD is not going to be required anymore. So we think that's a positive adjustment, but we're excited to continue. We think we've got the premier leadership and the premier leadership development program, internal leadership development program in the state. And so please continue with the positive attitudes, the open-mindedness, and all the other good things you're bringing to this program. We think it's successful and can continue to be so. So that's what I have, everybody. Thank you. And always feel free to reach out to our team if you have questions. Paul, the coaching component. the one-on-one coaching is no longer going to be required in answer to your question. But happy to answer any questions if you have them now. If not, I've taken more than my time, and I'll give it back to Director Dodge. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Daniel. I appreciate it. Well, we've got Daniel here. Any questions? Mary Lee?
I just wanted to add, I've been hearing and talked to JJ Acker yesterday about the fact that some frustrations about being able to get into the book club. There's not as many times available offerings. So like I said in my email, just be patient with us as we figure some of these things out. We're not going to leave you hanging. We're going to find ways for you to meet the requirements. We're all trying to figure this out together, but I know we're going to begin talking about how we can help out with that situation. So
Thanks, Mary Lee. Any other questions about the book program? Rachel, are you open to suggestions on books for future years if the book club continues?
For sure. Yeah, always. We can't promise that we'll listen to every suggestion or we'll employ every suggestion, but happily eager to hear from you on that. I appreciate your engagement level there. So for sure, our team is interested in that.
Great, thanks. Okay, I'm gonna move on. So, couple thoughts about the monthly newsletter, which was just released yesterday or the day before. We draw your attention to that. There are a number of recognitions from coworkers, numerous awards, recognition for excellence, employee spotlight, and so forth. These are all fun things, and my congratulations to each of you that are excelling in your particular area and achieving those kind of recognitions. We're proud of that, proud that you're part of the government ops family, and look forward to greater things to come for that. Please know we've outlined, again, we try to put in the newsletter some of these reminders. The annual leave rollover period ends June 23rd. So if you need to use annual leave, you better get at it. And speaking of that, I put in my summary comments at the beginning of the newsletter, and truly believe this. It's summer, so even though it's rained every day this week and for several weeks here in Salt Lake, although it's kind of refreshing to have the water again, take time to relax, to unwind, to regroup, if you will. Summer is a great time to do that. Utah is a beautiful place, and with all sorts of parks and places to hike and camp and so forth. And so I'd encourage you to get out, take some time off, relax and unwind so that you can stay fresh. As those around the executive director's office know, I had scheduled, when the governor and Chief Pierpont reached out to me, had scheduled with my wife a 2-week road trip, which we do every year in May. And so I actually asked if we could delay my appointment until the 1st of June, but the answer was no, and that was okay. We still squeezed it in between confirmation hearings and so forth. But my wife, and this is as much a mental break as I get in any year, but for a number of years we have a little trailer, and once we got past graduation at Southern Utah University, the morning after, we'd have our trailer packed and the fridge loaded with food and so forth, and we'd head out into the open roads. And we've done this for a number of years. It's just great time. We try to totally disconnect and ignore email and everything tied to work as much as possible. We make no reservations, no plans, and we don't schedule to be at any particular RV park. But we just wander and set an ultimate destination, and then if we see something interesting on the side of the road, we'll pull off, and maybe an hour, maybe 3 days that we spend there. Just each of you probably have some event, activity, or some place you go to unwind and decompress, and I would certainly encourage you to do that. This past weekend, we gathered together with all of our kids and grandkids and had a great little mini reunion as a family. in the Anti area, and I was reminded how quick kids grow up, which also means how quick we age. And looking at my picture on this, with all this white walls and white furniture behind me, I'm going to have to start dyeing my hair some color so you can see me not all washed out. But it's also a reminder. I received word on Monday that my 87-year-old mother fell and broke her hip, and so I'm off to my parents' house for the weekend to try to help out there. So time flies quickly. Be sure to relax and enjoy. Take time to stop and smell the roses, if you will. I'm going to turn a little bit over to Melissa here to talk about our employee intranet GovOps challenge for the summer, and have her chat a little bit about that for us.
Mark, before you do that, can I request a story?
Yeah. Sure.
Just tell them why your hot air balloon can't travel over certain towns.
Okay. This year's destination was set by my wife, which was to go to the ladies' mecca of Waco, Texas, to do all things Chip and Joanna Gaines at Magnolia Place and Magnolia Table and Magnolia everything. And actually, we had a great time. So we were there for several days, rode our bikes all over town, toured the place, but we spent several days in Albuquerque on our way down through there. And for years, we talked about doing a hot air balloon ride. And so we finally decided this time, let's just sign up and go on a hot air balloon ride, which was fabulous, other than the fact that we had to get up at like 4:30 in the morning because it's a sunrise event, and we had to be at the place early. But it was fascinating to see them inflate these balloons and see how they do it. And then just as you imagine a helium balloon just slowly rising, there were a dozen of us in this big basket, and they heated that thing up, and it just kind of rose up off the ground and floated over businesses and residential homes and so forth. We got to a particular area where, and there were a dozen or 15 balloons all around us at the same time. Albuquerque's quite amazing for that. There was one balloon that started heading over a particular neighborhood, and our pilot had to radio over to him and say, "Hey, remember, you can't go there." Well, of course, that piqued all of our interest on why. And he said, what you don't recognize is when we turn that flame on, which is equivalent to 3,000 barbecue grills, so puts off an intense amount of heat, it has a really high-pitched whistle that only dogs can hear when they light that flame. So then we started paying attention to the fact that every time we were floating over a neighborhood and he hit that flame to add more hot air to the balloon, you could hear every dog in the neighborhood just start barking and going crazy. So for those who live in Albuquerque, it certainly is a beautiful place, and the balloons are fun, but I would not want to live in a neighborhood that had a dog, because every single time he did that, all the dogs around just started yapping and barking. It was pretty funny. So here's my hot air balloon story. All right, Melissa.
Well, this is a perfect segue to talk about the GovOps challenge for the summer. As you get out and travel, as Marvin's encouraged everyone to do, and enjoy your time off, we've put a little list out on the employee intranet, and I'll throw the link up in the questions in the message board here in just a second. Giving you a little bit of a start in different categories: food trucks, food halls, pizza. I don't think there's tacos, but I think there's ice cream, shakes, all different kinds of things for everybody to just go experiment, farmers markets, just go out there and see what's available and participate. Come back to the GovOps intranet and throw some comments into the links. We're going to have some prizes along the way, so be looking out for that. But just a good way to enjoy your summer is accept our foodie challenge. So there you have it.
Awesome. Thanks, Melissa. I love this idea. Of course, I've lived in rural Utah for a lot of years and wandered through podunk towns. So I'll throw out a couple of suggestions, and this may not be the way they had the rules intended, but if you get to Ephraim, Utah, make sure you eat at Roy's Pizza on Main Street. That is a family-owned pizza shop. Roy is the owner, and he and his wife and kids have run that for a lot of years. If you want really good Italian food in Cedar City, go to the Chevron station at the south exit by the Walmart store, Bruno's Pizza and Pasta. And love their sauce. It's a homemade sauce, which is really good. Anyway, a couple suggestions, but it's fun to get out there. We look forward to hearing from it on other nice or neat little niches or mom and pop restaurants that are very fun to do. All right, Marilee, since you're still up there, do you want to talk to us a little bit about pay for performance?
Sure. So we are quickly a couple weeks away from when pay for performance is official. Let me just highlight just a couple of things that I also included in that email. So I think one of the things that's really important for each of you to understand is pay for performance is as much your responsibility as it is your supervisor's responsibility. This is a partnership. This is a joint endeavor. And I would just so encourage you, as these performance plans are launched by August 15th, that you get in there and write in your own performance plan. If you have done something that you feel like should be highlighted in your efforts to achieve or accomplish the things that have been set out in that performance plan, go in and document them yourself. That's not just for your supervisor. So I really want to stress that. There's been a little bit of confusion, and Jason, can you put yourself on mute? There's been just a little bit of confusion about when pay for performance dollars are available. I've had so many people ask me if they were going to see those pay for performance raises in July. So that's not the case. July 1st begins the performance evaluation period. And then those dollars, they may be available. Some may be available quarterly, as in the case of DTS. I think most of the department, it will be more on an annual basis, although division by division, that's up to your division director. It does not mean, another thing that I've heard frequently is, does it mean that everyone's getting a 2.5% increase? No, that's not what it means. What it means is that your division has been assigned a certain amount of dollars, and we've met with each division director so that they understand what amount of money they're accountable for. So for the ISFs, they don't actually receive cash, but we recover that money through rates. But because of this legislation, they must allocate this specific dollar amount that's only set for pay for performance. And then the department has decided on a 1, 2, 3 scale. We may change that in years in the future, but for right now, that's what we're going to try. So the policy says that if you're a 3, you get more than a 2. But if you're a 3 or a 2, you get something. Now, that doesn't mean if you're on a quarterly basis that every 2 gets something. What it means is during that annual period, a 3 and a 2 will get something based on the funds available. If you get a 1, you won't get anything. Another question that I hear really frequently is, does this mean that COLAs go away? And all I can say is that is in the hands of the legislature. We have no idea how they're going to do this. Certainly within their power to give a COLA on top of wow, that's hard to say, pay for performance. But that it doesn't mean that they will. So all I can tell you is I will be glued to session just like all of you, and can't wait to hear what they do. But they're very committed to pay for performance. And so that's what pay for performance and how you do your job, that's what's within your power. So that's what I hope your focus will be on. Other questions? Do you have any questions about this? Okay, well, good. Rock and roll.
Okay.
Marv,
Thanks,
I
Marilyn.
just want to
Yeah.
know if you actually can consider yourself a foodie expert if you are actually referring people to the Chevron station for Italian food.
It is so funny to tell people, yeah, you want really good Italian, go to the Chevron station. It literally is built on the side of the Chevron station. So trust me, it's good. You'll enjoy it if you go there. There's another, and this is kind of a funny side note at Cedar. On Main Street, there's the All American Diner, which is another one of these hometown restaurants. And they are famous for the chow line, which is like the ultimate breakfast experience. That's this massive plate of every type of meat, bacon, sausage, cheese, potatoes, green peppers. I've never ordered one because there's no way I could eat all of it. I've seen football players walk out of there with a little doggy bag because they couldn't eat the whole thing. So I had a consultant in town several months ago who was from Chicago, and normally these stuffed shirts you anticipate wanting to go to some place that's fancy and nice and so forth. And he said, "No, I want to go. What's the best greasy spoon in town?" And once I realized he wasn't kidding, I said, "We'll take you to the All American Diner," and it was hilarious. He absolutely loved it. And he had a colleague who was a former football player who did order the chow line and was able to eat the entire thing, although he kind of felt sick the rest of the day. So anyway, there's another local dives I quite enjoy. All right.
Can I just answer Paul's question? So Paul, are there templates that are being developed that we will need to use in FY24 performance plans? So here's what the intention is. We're trying to give the divisions as much leeway as we can to allow them to adapt to the specific needs in their own divisions. What we will be providing is some examples, and we'll provide it both to supervisors and to employees so that you can participate in the writing of your own performance plans. But we're not going to say this is what it needs to look like. What we are going to say is, here are some ways to measure things that in the past have been difficult to measure. So here are some good behavior goals. In other words, if Chris Hughes is just screaming good at his job, that he's just a great big jerk, then we are going to write that into his performance plan and create some ways that we can measure and have robust discussions around his effect on his team. That would be one example. Much of what we're going to incorporate into our examples comes from the GOLD training on results. So if any of you saw that training, we're trying to take what we learned there and incorporate that into the performance plan, so that you can see some examples and have some good discussions. But we are not going to get super prescriptive as to what those performance plans look like. I do want to just add one more thing, and that is, particularly as we go through this first year, Chris and I, we're going to divide and conquer, but we will be looking at every single performance plan and the recommendation so that we can make sure that there's consistency across the department in how we're assigning those dollars to a 2 or a 3. Did that answer that? Okay.
Hey, thanks, Marilee. There was a question that came in. What role does monthly coaching play in the pay for performance?
So that's kind of what Dan talked about. So that's not required, that coaching anymore. So I think that the answer to that question is it's a very individual thing if you need coaching.
Dan, you got your hand up.
Yeah, no, I think Marilee answered it well. The only thing I'd add is it depends on if you're referring to the coaching that is required by DGO's performance management practices that we've prescribed for at least 1.5 years, 2 years now. But if you're referring to the coaching that's part of GOLD, and I think Marilee answered this really well, then no, that is no longer a requirement unless it becomes part of your very idiosyncratic performance plan that you and a manager agree on and say, I want you to go get coaching. I think you need that. But I just want to say, I'm speaking out of turn here, so I apologize, Marilee and Director Dodge. Our managers in GovOps, I think, should be more prepared for this than any other managers in the state, because we've adopted the majority of the practices that became HB 104, the 2022 bill, HB 104, the requirements. We have adopted those practices 2 years ago. And part of the motivation for that, only part of it, but part of it was to demonstrate that it could be done in terms of the quarterly evaluations, the behavioral expectations, things of that nature. So while there is this big shift coming with the direction of the leadership team that you've gotten recently and the further direction that you're going to get, we're fully confident that our managers are prepared to handle this. Not that it's easy, not that there aren't going to be adjustments and discomfort, but for sure, the goal has been that you've been preparing for this for a couple of years now. And I think that's the good news. So anyway, I just wanted to share that.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. There was another one here that came in. Are we competing with our teammates with pay for performance? I would add, and then Marilee, you can follow it. I sure hope that we don't view it as a competition among ourselves or our coworkers and colleagues, but much like a track and field event, that it's a competition for each of us to perform the best that we possibly can, and have it as a team sport, so to speak, but not competing against each other, but within ourselves to be the best that we can be. But Marilee, I don't know if you want to add anything.
I totally agree with that. And I don't see it as a competing thing either. That being said, there are limited amount of dollars that we have to split. And so I think that the onus is going to be heavily on managers and you working together to give solid performance evaluations. And I just want to say a couple of things about that. Number one, like I referred to with Chris, who, by the way, is my bestie, so he is not hard to work with, but I'm just using him as an example. Again, Chris can do like a bang up job in the skills portion, but could have a negative effect on the team. Well, if I have limited amount of dollars, you better believe I am going to give that money to those who are doing their job and are also building team members. So that competition feeling is a dangerous paradigm that I hope that we don't buy into. The other thing that I want to just say is, on a 3-point scale, I've heard some employees express some concern that their managers are saying a 3 is not possible. A 3 should be challenging to get. There's no doubt about that. But getting a 3 should not mean that you are having to work 20 extra overtime hours a week. I keep hearing, well, a 3 equates to overtime and I can't work overtime because of my family situation. JJ and Cass and I were talking about this yesterday, and I'm just going to give an example that's pretty obvious to me. The makers, the designers of this gold training, that's 3 work. That is a level 3 work. They are creating this amazing program that we've never done before. I've heard so many positive comments about the impact of this. I mean, JJ could also be a jerk, so who knows if he's going to get a 3 or not. But what I'm saying is, like, that's an example of work that is impactful. It's beyond the call of duty. It's it makes lasting difference. That's what 3 work looks like. Level 2 means you are showing up and you are doing the things that we hired you to do, and that's impressive. And we succeed on the backs of 2s. So that is impressive work and should be rewarded. 1 is somebody who consistently has to have additional supervision to do their job. It means that they do the least amount required. It means they have a negative impact on their team. That's a 1. So are we competing against team members? No. But it does mean that the splits, if all of your team is doing fantastically, then we might be splitting the money a little bit differently. Dan, do you have anything more to add to that?
No, I think that's really well said. The other thing I would say is what we've been saying in our trainings that we've been doing is we're going to get better at this. What you see though, and the point that Marilee made is that this is all very organic and should reflect both the behavioral components and the production components. In other words, there are ways that we are training you on ways to capture actual value add. And I think that's what Marilee is saying. The only other thing I would say quickly to the question that came up earlier, I'm gonna go against Director Dodge and Marilee here for a second and say, in one sense, you've always been in competition with other people. You always are, right, with people, including your colleagues, and yet Marilee answered it perfectly. We mitigate that from becoming toxic competition because of the behavioral expectation. We avoid that because you cannot simply be the best producer and everything else is compromised, right? You have to be a good organizational citizen. You have to be a good team member, right? You have to demonstrate attributes and the values of GovOps in this case, and the values of your division and the value of your team. And so all these questions are very good. Please, 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 if you have not yet, so many of these questions that Marilee is answering right now would be answered if you revisit, if you've already taken it, or if you have not taken the online performance management training that is required, both as part of Gold and by the state. It is required. You need to take it in order to be compliant. You've got to take it by June 30th. So many of these questions, so many of your concerns will be mitigated as you participate in that. And the good news is it's self-paced. And if you've taken it, take it again. Right? Take it again. So I didn't really add anything new other than to say I agree with I appreciate what Marilee is saying about the things that we've done to mitigate so many of these concerns. Not that, again, it's not going to be easy, but managers, you've got this. As we iterate, we'll get better at this. We'll get better at this and ultimately have more fidelity and accuracy to the ratings that people deserve. So
I want to just add something too that I've heard some employees express concern about, and I hope that most of you don't have to worry about this, but a question that I've had 3 or 4 times over the last week or so is, in the past, I haven't been able to get increases because there's not money. We would have to raise rates or something. There's not money. So I want to be really clear, like, this is statute. And this is money that we have to spend on pay for performance. So are we going to have to raise rates to be able to do this? Yes, we are. There's no question we are going to have to do that, particularly in some of the ISFs. But 2.5%, which is based on your head count and current compensation, 2.5% has been assigned to each of the divisions, and that money must be spent on pay for performance. So I don't want you to be concerned about the rate aspect. There was another question saying, is it a bonus or is it a raise? So the intention of pay for performance is that it should come in an ASI. However, this first year, I believe we are going to allow some incentives if there is a good reason for doing that. But the intention behind the legislation is that this comes in salary increase. And again, this is where I'm just asking for your patience. We are all trying to figure this out together. So Jacob Adams, this is the first I'm hearing about this training. Is it for managers, supervisors, or everyone? Dan, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I got to be honest, Jacob. That crushed me when you said it's the first you're hearing about this. This has been available since October. And you just got a link to it, right? This is, let me just tell you what it is. It's two things. First of all, it is part of the left column of gold, which is the required training. So if you've ever seen anything about gold, you've seen it there. But what this really is, we created this online training for the entire state of Utah to satisfy the requirement in the bill that every supervisor is trained annually. Anybody that is responsible for the performance of anybody else, this is only supervisors and managers. They have to take this training. They have to be trained annually. We offer this statewide. As it turns out, every single agency in the executive branch, except for one, is utilizing this training, including DGO, including GovOps, right? So it's a robust training, but it is virtual and self-paced and very thorough. The feedback we have gotten so far from this required training that is part of gold, right, but also required for the entire state, essentially, the feedback we've gotten is really, really positive. So take it in those moments when, I know some of you will say you don't find those moments, but when you have around other meetings or other tasks, when you can fit in, because we're coming up against it now. Everyone in the state of Utah has to have been trained on this by July 1.
So I would like to just add something there, because I think there's a little bit of confusion about training for managers and supervisors versus other training. So the gold training is only required by managers and supervisors. That being said, and I know this is going to excite you, I've been talking with JJ, again, who is our consultant for implementing. I keep talking about JJ, and that's why, because he's assigned to GovOps as our consultant. But I've been talking to him about creating some training that, in my opinion, it should be required for every employee, because you play such a crucial role in the captaining of your own ship. So JJ, if you're on, do you want to talk about that? I think we might be approaching that in a phased approach.
Yes, we've been talking about that and looking at the objectives for that, and a piece that that employees play in driving their own performance and really documenting their own performance as well. So we'll be looking at that. That will be, I guess you could call that a phase 2, right? Something that will be up and coming, and will offer employees really a sense of this is that I'm in control of my my own performance as well, and have a great amount of input in that.
One last thing that I'd like to say about training, though, is, and this is true for every employee, and that is one of the requirements for you to be eligible for a pay for performance increase, is that you are current on all training. So that means respect in the workplace, the ethics training, the security training that we have to take. If you drive for the state, you have to have your driver's license thing current. I mean, there's all kinds of it. What current means isn't that you have to have taken it. It means that if at the time of your evaluation, all trainings that have been due by that evaluation must be current. So if your evaluation is in May, but your driver's license training isn't due until October, you're good. You're good. You're current. So it doesn't just include pay for performance training. It includes all trainings.
Okay. Great conversation. Any others out there? We think we've hit that. Let me add just a couple things about legislative action, because I was asked to cover that, and then we'll just open it up for any questions you might have. So the last 2 days have been busy on the Hill. I had the opportunity to testify at the IGG committee for accountable budget review. This is basically the zero-based budget review process. And every year, the legislative fiscal analyst chooses a handful of departments that they're going to do the zero-based budgeting exercise with. We are part of that this year. So this was really an introductory piece to that. And Jake is working through that in the department as we respond to the LFA and come up with information that they're looking for. And it may become a deeper conversation, which would be fun. I was attended and testified at the Legislative Audit Committee on a performance audit of collection, protection, and the use of personal information by the state. This is an initiative that Chris Bramwell is heading up. For those of you that know Chris and have been working with him, this is different than our traditional data security piece, because this is how can we use information, personal information, once it's collected. The federal government has a lot of rules and regulations in this area. States largely do not. And so it's interesting that the initiative we've taken here at the state of Utah really is cutting edge. And Chris and his team are doing a remarkable job at fleshing this out and educating legislators. And the audit was very welcome, because they came back with recommendations to build guardrails and to establish a policy and so forth. It's exactly what we were hoping for, because this is going to require legislative action, and we're glad that they're engaged and on board with it. And there'll be a lot more about this as we move forward. A lot of states are looking at Utah as we're developing these tools and these guardrails, if you will, for adoption in all states. So it's really kind of a fun project. And then yesterday in our GovOps committee, John Barron shared a PowerPoint presentation talking about employee retention and recruitment. Focusing, the legislature and this committee in particular has been concerned about those positions that are eternally posted, because we just can't seem to hire enough folks. And it was also quite fascinating to me, and John and I have had some follow-up conversation, that 45% of the state's workforce, just about 10,000 employees, stay 5 years or less. So there's tremendous retention issue in my mind. So we're going to start thinking through how can we address retention and try to keep folks here longer than 5 years. And then Alan Fuller gave a great presentation on artificial intelligence. It's out on the legislative website if you're interested in this. We're starting to see more and more newspaper articles and stories about it. It's actually scary what can be done. It's absolutely fascinating, the technology, but when used inappropriately, could lead down an amazingly destructive path. And so, again, we're working with the governor's office and the legislature to start thinking about how do we address artificial intelligence in the workforce and all the things that could come creeping in and so forth. So it's beyond just college students using it to write their term papers for them, which is part of what you can do with AI. But there are many tentacles in this area. It was a fascinating discussion, and the committee was just kind of at the edge of their seats as they were learning about some of the potential for good and for bad in that particular role. So with that, unless Chris or Marilee, you have anything else, let's just open it up for any questions, comments, rumors, anything that we can address before we let you go to lunch. Okay. No questions. I don't know if that's good or bad, but again, thanks. I'm really genuine. Please be mindful of your mental health. And we all have stressors in our lives that aren't just work. So take care of yourselves. Take some time off. Go relax. Enjoy either the rain or the sun if it comes out. And when it comes out, it's rare. I've been on a rare occasion. I've seen Utah as green as it is this year, which is absolutely beautiful. And as I drove up Highway 89, coming back from Bryce Canyon last week, just some of the most beautiful territory in the country, and love it. So hope you'll get out and enjoy some of that. If there's nothing else, we'll say thanks until next month.